Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legion. A lot of very interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're seeing Oliver and Melanie again. I was wondering about that. I was like, will we ever go back to that? But I'm like, oh, they're off in their happiness, their happy world. They're never going to come back. And then lo and behold, we get an episode dedicated to. And it's like, but you were in the iceberg, you were in astral plane, but now this place is what it is. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's like the astral plane is kind of what you need it to be. It's a place where, a powerful people, with powerful minds like, David and as well as Oliver's can kind of do what they need to do. I guess you can even make the argument Farouk can definitely go there too, but it's a whole thing of like, I guess it's more so the place is what you need it to be. And like, obviously with, getting ahead of myself, but I think it's like they made it what she needed to be. Sid, like I said, we'll get to that soon enough, but I think it was all for the purpose of shaping it for this test of some sort. But nevertheless, so basically they're living in these woods and they're collecting stuff, including a baby. Part of me was like, oh, is that baby supposed to be David? Like, what's going on there? It's like, but then like, Melanie's like, oh, this baby seems so familiar, and it's Sid. Throughout the entire day, it took me a little while until Sid started remembering, and I was like, right, because I forgot that David's like, wasn't David. Well, David / Legion locked away her mind last episode. So I was like, okay, because apparently this is, like I said, still the astral plane, but then you go out and see that it's like, wait, it's just they're inside of a little decorative plant on the outsides of like someone's apartment building, and it's the city. So I was like, wait, what? I guess it's one of those things where it's like the astral plane kind of manifests itself in, it's just, I guess it's like a prison within a prison within a prison. Like there's layers to the whole situation that yes, it's the astral world, but it manifests itself as just kind of symbolizing as just a plant in the real world. You know what I'm trying to say? I guess kind of the boundaries between the astral plane and reality just can take whatever shape and form it really needs to be, like I said. So it was really interesting kind of breaking everything down. Also, the wolf, which, later on his name's Jerome, but that's the Eric, that's the actor who plays Derek in The Good Place. He's popped up in other things, but that's what I've kind of most recently kind of known from, Derek. So I was like, holy crap, and he's like a wolf, and I love that whole line of him kept bringing up, oh, let her tell you about chlamydia. But seeing Sid grow up, and obviously she has so many questions, but you have Oliver pacing things. It's like, no, you learn about, the real world when you're older and when you're ready, it's so interesting because the entire thing is a gigantic lesson. Step by step, they're trying to wane her into it. But I love the whole thing of like Melanie being like, oh, like, why does this seem so familiar? And Oliver's like, oh, like, she's like, oh, what about before? And Oliver's like, there is no before this. Because I think it's that haze that you get when you're in the astral plane for a long time. Like, so much time passes and just time itself just kind of loses. Because even the moment he kind of forgets what the word is for city. We saw that kind of happen before. Like, we see all that happen to him in season 1. We saw this happen to him and Melanie at the end of season 2. Just that whole aspect of kind of forgetting a lot of stuff when you're kind of caught up in everything. But it was really interesting kind of seeing everything kind of unfold, the introduction of Cynthia, and it's like, oh, she's got these drugs and everything, but the wolf keeps kind of pulling her back in. And it's like, oh, your boyfriend, he was abusive, but he loves you. And so it's like, oh, come on back, he's really sorry. And so there's that. There's the whole, I also love like Sid getting a little older. Melanie tells her like the birds and the bees, and it's like, what is chlamydia? And Sid asks, and Melanie is like, where'd you get that? She's like, from the wolf. She's like, well, you know how when someone sneezes on you get sick because it's the passing of a virus? Well, it's basically explaining it was a sexually transmitted disease from like having unprotected sex. It's like, no, it's a code for your vagina, and it happens from unprotected sex. And it's like, the body's disgusting. I love that. I wasn't expecting her to actually give a full-blown explanation like that. I was like, oh, okay, so you just legitimately broke it down like that. I just thought that was kind of fascinating. But like I said, I'm still curious, like, what the wolf's, like, fascination, because every time it's like, oh, ask her about chlamydia. Why the fuck did that keep coming up? I don't know why. But that is like a thing that I think that's the whole point of it too, is because it's like, oh, we want you to ask questions. Like, we want you to be in a position where you can ask questions because you need to answer them. But it's like she's having nightmares. Basically, those nightmares are her memories from her life. Basically stuff we've kind of seen her go through over the course of Legion. And so it's interesting because obviously, like, she doesn't want to talk about the nightmares because at first it's like, I guess it's because she doesn't really understand what's going on. They kind of have a better picture, but I think they're still kind of foggy to a certain extent. But nevertheless, going deeper into it, we see her get a little older. And obviously, we're more familiar with this Sid because this is the Sid we kind of got to see last season, her as a teenager. So, which obviously the same, version of her popped up this season. But obviously that was like a time demon, pretending to be her teenage self. Well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself in a certain regard. I thought it was kind of interesting because, like, the big bad wolf blew down their straws. Like I said, it's so interesting, like, fairy tales, borderline fairy tale stuff that they were using. Like, obviously, like, they're using kind of, like, the three little pigs and the big bad wolf type of situation. And I guess, like, Cynthia was kind of supposed to play, like, maybe kind of like a Red Riding Hood type of situation. Maybe. Because it's interesting, because I was talking about it before, like, Legion kind of, like, certain aspects of Legion kind of had a very, like, Alice in Wonderland aesthetic, especially when it was stuff dealing with, like, the girls in the cult, as well as Lenny, like, looking like the Mad Hatter in a little tea party. So, like, there's aesthetics in that regard, too. But, it's interesting. It's like, oh, the house got blown down. We're going to have to move. But when it zoomed out, it looked more like a little piece of island in the middle of the astral plane, like the glowy green place. That's what it looked more like. But it's like they moved from the woods or the forest to the city. And they're like, Sid is saying like, no, I'm ready. But it's like, no, you got to structure these things out. The fact of the matter is, enjoy being a kid while you can. Being safe as a kid means you can be safe as an adult. Because basically you have your entire life to be old. So don't waste that time, essentially give yourself the time to figure everything out, because there's a structure to everything. Because while you're young, like, that could be making you make mistakes and be wild as an adult. She ends up running into Cynthia, and I guess Cynthia and her kids were supposed to be representation of, like, kind of drawing her back into the real world, because it's like, oh, you like video games? It's like, what? And then, like, her son was mentioning off-brand cereals, because one of them was like fruit something, which I guess it's supposed to be Fruit Loops, and the daughter was like, oh, you like vodka? It's like, no. And then it's like, oh yeah, movies about slavery, and it's like, wait, what? And because it's interesting, because it's also a part of Cynthia that's like, oh yeah, like, do they talk about me? You probably don't remember me. And she's like, no, we talk about you all the time. And obviously the whole situation scares her, especially because it's like, oh, this all deals with Jerome. So she's like, I'm done. I don't want to have anything to do with the real world. But Melanie is like, no, like, we're putting you in this position. We're not trying to protect you from the real world. We're trying to prepare you for it. Because yeah, there's bad things in there, but you can fix them. So, which obviously is kind of like, oh, so that's kind of, like I said, I'll get to it soon enough. But then it turns into a whole thing of, like, what she wants to do about everything. And so Sid is like, I want to save Cynthia. It's the right thing to do. And when she saves Cynthia, and I'm like, okay, now that's the thing I was trying to understand too. It's like, who was who in this metaphor? At first I was like, is the wolf supposed to be David? And I was thinking like maybe Sid was supposed to be Cynthia. But then when she gets Cynthia, she's like, the fact is you are loved. We're here to help you. I'm like, that's the stuff that David wants to hear. So David's supposed to be Cynthia, because the whole conversation's about like, oh, people you can't save. Well, it's that whole thing of like, some people you can't save some people because some people don't want to be saved. And as I guess a metaphor for like the whole David situation, because Jerome is supposed to represent kind of like maybe his more darker impulses. But at the same time, you could also make the argument like, but at the same time, there's certain elements where it seemed like it might have been referencing Sid. It's because Sid, it was like, oh, you have this abusive boyfriend. He's sorry, but he loves you. Well, let's not forget what David did to Sydney last season, messing with her brain and everything. Like, that's what she's been holding on. That's what I'm wondering, is that what that's supposed to be representing of, like, so, but I'd assume it's just supposed to be kind of, like I said, more so the drug of like, oh yeah, like, because David was hooked on drugs and everything. So there was like elements to that. And also, like I said, being kind of drawn in by this evil force and kind of getting seduced by it. So Jerome's, I guess, supposed to be kind of like, not necessarily Farouk, but more so like David's own dark side of his consciousness, Legion itself pulling him in. It's like, oh, come in, David, like we'll be here. You'll always have a place with us type of situation. I love that it turned into a rap battle between Oliver and Jerome. I was not expecting that, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I'm not that familiar with it, but obviously he's actually plays Oliver. I know he's from like Flight of the Conchord. I have a friend who like loves Flight of the Conchord. She'd always kind of recommend it to me. Like, I'm not that familiar with it, but I feel like that'd be something you kind of get from Flight of the Conchord. I might be way off basis because I'm not that familiar with it, but it's so interesting because remember last season, David had a dance off it was technically Farouk, but it was more so Oliver and Lenny he had a dance off against, and it's kind of representative of like, it's so interesting when they do weird stuff like this. I was like, having a rap battle, what? And it's interesting, and I love he ends up kind of going, the beat goes silent, and then he starts ripping into Jerome, and he's just kind of like all sad, and Cynthia's like, no, oh, like, thank you for trying, but we're better together. And he's like, oh, the mean man said some mean stuff to me, and they're walking away, and he kind of puts on the devilish smile. But like I said, the point is to teach Sid that, yeah, you can want to save people, but sometimes they might not want to be saved. So it's like, at the very least, you have to try. At least in this case, they tried so they can show her and teach her that lesson. So the question now becomes a thing of like, I guess maybe it's supposed to represent the fact that she is going to try and save David one last time. If she isn't able to save him, then she has to do what she has to do. Because so far, it's like, well, to be fair, you can make the argument in season 2. She was trying to, at season 2's finale, she was trying to save him, and he kind of did what he did, and now it's just kind of like, oh, I have to put you down. But I'm curious to see where that kind of all stands. It is kind of interesting because at the end, you have Melanie be like, is it time? And it's like, yeah, Melanie kind of looks more like herself, like more modern clothing, much like Oliver, and I think that's them kind of breaking the spell of being like, okay, we remember everything. Which, like, I'm so curious, like, how you get from point A to point B, how you get from the season 2 finale to where they are now. I guess knowing that Sydney's in trouble, like, I guess it did something, kind of awaken something, like because the astral plane is all about things that are lost. That's why I was kind of wondering if it was supposed to be David, because I thought David was kind of getting submerged in that darkness, and it's supposed to be like his conscience, like the good that might be in him might have been there, but it's like, no, that was Sydney being lost. So I'm curious, like, did he sense that and kind of sensing what's happening in the real world? It's like, we're staying here, but we're preparing you because you're the one that has to go out there. Because they obviously, Sydney grows up and everything. She's her adult self. And then she wakes up. I love her explaining it later on, basically. I love time trippy stuff like that, where it's like literally David, which is, I guess it's supposed to be reminiscent of it too, because I brought that up before, the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, the episode last season was like David inside of Sydney's head, and it kind of repeats that to a certain extent, because they even do the whole like, oh, the intro credits run it near the end of the episode, and in this case it's like Sydney waking up, it's basically only 20 minutes, and she even talks about the fact, because like Carrie's like, whoa, are you something different about you? She's like, well, I did kind of basically live a second life in the span of 20 minutes plus, and it might be my hair. So obviously they're kind of beating down David's in the time portal. Once again, we still don't know what specific point in time he's going to, because I was thinking like, oh, maybe go back to killing Farouk, but I'm like, the whole point of, well, because the thing is, we know that with Switch, she didn't want to go back to the whole baby situation, which is like, she was going to like, hey, if I have to, I will. There's a part of me wondering, is that supposed to be a metaphor in that same regard too? Because I guess you could make the metaphor of like Jerome being David and Cynthia being Switch. Like, that's why I'm like, I don't know if it's as that open to interpretation, or like I said, I feel like the first one about Cynthia being David and Jerome being Legion, that's what that's supposed to be. But I feel like it can apply in many different regards. I don't know if that's what it's meant to do, or whether I'm just reading way too much into it, and it is a lot clearer and a lot simpler than I'm making it. But it's just, it's a fascinating thing. But essentially, I was like the point I was trying to make is, I don't think Switch want to go back that far because too much damage, but I guess it's supposed to be a one and all, like this is a final shot, make the big changes this time, type of thing. So part of me, my thought last time was like, okay, maybe David's going back to kill Farouk before when his dad thought like, oh, I defeated Farouk, but Farouk hid inside of David as a baby. I'm thinking he might go back and just straight up kill Farouk at that moment, or maybe there's something else. I'm not sure how far back he's going to go, because obviously the further back he goes, the more damage, more it's going to take out on Switch. So like I said, I'm very interested to find out what time period he ends up going to. But obviously it seems like David's kind of won. A lot of people have been killed, or rather taken out of commission, at least in Farouk's case. I don't know if he's coming out of that space in between time and space and whatnot. So there's that aspect to it. And I thought was kind of interesting because like there's a whole like, okay, we got to be prepared for war because like I'm going after David. I still have a chance to change everything before he makes a change. And it was even interesting because you kind of have Carrie. She's mentioning like, oh, what's going to happen if he changes everything, because it's like, what about us? Like, will it be kind of like an immediate thing of like, I interpret that as kind of like that typical scene of like, when it comes to changes happening to the timeline, will it happen all at once and we'll be aware of it, or will we not be aware of it? I mean, more so than anything, like how different will our lives be? Like what kind of effect will it have on us? And even Carrie's like, he's like, I don't know, so he builds the devices to help them kind of go after David, but then it comes to the whole question of like, yeah, like Sydney's going to need my help. And, Carrie's like, but like, I can't in my condition because she's pretty beat up. And then she's like, but you, on the other hand, like to do your job, you mostly need to be sitting. At first, it took me a little while because I was like, what is she like saying specific? Because I was like, oh, I thought it was like, because I figured I was like, oh, it had to be something about them combining. So I thought like in the beginning, I was like, oh, so they must be like, oh, he's going to go inside of her. She's going to get all repaired up. I was like, maybe this is kind of like him having to basically say goodbye that, because like the whole issue last season was like they got split apart. They couldn't go back together correctly. It was just, she couldn't go back on the inside because now they're more so like two separate people rather than the one person that they were before, to a certain extent, But I was like, oh, but then she gets inside of him and then he takes on the wounds and everything. I was like, right. They did that back in season 1 when she got really messed up. Basically, he takes all her wounds and her pain, and when she comes out, she's fully restored, refreshed. I was like, right. Because I don't think they've done that at all. I mean, to be fair, their situation is what it is in season 2, so it probably doesn't present itself for that. But just like, yeah, the last time we saw it happen was in season 1, so I just thought that was kind of fascinating. They kind of bring that back in this regard, which he's pretty banged up, and it's like, oh, the time meters are closing down, because I figured that would be the case. So while they're all doing this and the time meters are running rampant, I am curious, are they going to follow them into the portal and kind of follow them across time? Because all of that's present day, but I think it's like the more of the present day they eat, the more they start eating across all of time, or maybe all the time meters are scattered across time. Because I was like, the gate was still spinning at the end of the last episode, and we could hear the time eaters, doing their thing. So I was like, okay, so what's up with that? So it's a very big race against time. I did like that, like one tried to sneak up. I was like, oh man, don't tell me Carrie's gonna stay behind just to fight them all. But she's like, nope, kicks one in the face, jumps through, and it's like, okay, we're gonna win this time. And it's like, yeah, so holy crap, so this kind of means that basically David's kind of got like a 20-minute head start, a little more so, which is also interesting considering, the way time works and everything. So it's going to be a little more complicated than that. But I'm so excited to see where, this next battle, this next phase of everything takes place. How Sydney's going to handle everything with what she's been taught by, because it's interesting because a big thing that like Melanie was saying in the story was like, oh, there's this little girl who had a special power, empathy, which is, I guess to a certain extent you could say, like, when you break down Sydney's ability, it kind of works like that. Like her power isn't, it's not even, it's more of a direct form of empathy, because it's a whole metaphor of like, oh, walk a mile in someone's shoe. She can literally walk a mile in someone else's shoe. And so like to kind of understand people on a level like that, to understand David, might be the key to figuring this whole thing out. I don't know, because it's interesting, because it's like, at what point does another person end and you begin? That's the whole problem with empathy and stuff like that, because when you kind of get so consumed with someone else's feelings and stuff like that, it's like, so what's their feelings and how they're feeling, and what's just me being empathetic and kind of taking on their feelings, So I just thought that was just kind of a fascinating little thing. Once again, maybe it's a situation of me overthinking it, but I'm so curious to see where things go, because, well, David doesn't have any more allies. Not like he needs them. Once again, like, will Farouk play a part in this? Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Let's not forget he has one of those devices on his arm, so it's like if he manages to get out, he could follow them across time too as well, because his might be synced up to track them across time. In particular, Switch. Will Switch have a change of heart with all of this going down? Will she kind of be like, oh no, this isn't, like I said, there's little bits about her backstory. We get tidbits towards, but we're like, what is that really? I don't know. I'm so interested to see where this all takes us. We're down to the wire, ladies and gentlemen. 2 episodes left, Allegiant, and it's going to be crazy to see what they have in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.